continually strive for here at Global Sciences is simply a search for the truth. Sometimes the truth is not what people want to hear. Sometimes it is. In the case of our group here, a lot of you would like to know the truth, and a lot of you are pretty aware of the truth of what we call the freedom, what I call the freedom movement, or the tax honesty movement. The next speaker you hear will be Bill Benson of South Holland, Illinois. You may have seen Bill on television shows. You may have read about him taking part in many different rallies around the country trying to ferret out the truth about the thing we call the federal income tax. As a result of his work, which consisted of thousands and thousands of miles and thousands of hours, he has produced what will become a collector's item in the package of 2 booklets. So I want to have Bill tell you his story, what he did, what he documented, and what he has documentation for you if you wish to buy it and take it home. And it is a pleasure to introduce for the first time to Global Sciences Bill Benson of South Holland, Illinois. Bring him on with a real welcome, please.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for that warm welcome. And I can only say one thing. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself at this conference, and Dean certainly deserves a great deal of credit for putting on the conference that he did. The other thing is that I'm certainly glad that Anne Marie and I are on different subjects, because that's a pretty tough act to follow. In the year of 1984, I traveled to each and every of the 48 state capitals researching the 16th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And I did that because I was a former investigator for the Criminal Investigation Division for the Illinois Department of Revenue. Because of the corruption I uncovered within that department, the director had called me in and he said, "Bill, shut your mouth, remain silent. Don't talk to people about what you see, what you know, and what you hear." He said, "Take the envelopes like everybody else does. Let them put money in your briefcase. Let them slip it in your car, but just go along like everybody else does." And I tell him I'm sorry I wasn't raised that way. I do not intend to take bribes, and I do fully intend to stop the corruption within this department. He said, "If you say another word, I'll fire you." And I said, "You might as well do it like yesterday, because I'm going to continue. And if you fire me, I'll sue you for violation of First Amendment rights." And we both kept our word. He fired me, I sued him. It took 6.5 years to get state government into court. They played every trick in the book as far as postponements are concerned. One of the nice things when you're an investigator and when you know the tricks of the game, when you know the paperwork flow throughout state government, it works virtually the same in every state. With the attorneys that were battling me in this lawsuit, during the course of the trial, we had a 5.5-week trial. The attorneys had to file an invoice voucher to get paid every month. They also had to have a contract which they worked under. So the capital of Illinois is Springfield, and I knew where to get those records and those documents. Records and documents are extremely important. When I pulled the invoice vouchers on the attorneys, I could tell how much money the state was spending to fight me, right to the penny, but I could also tell what the attorneys were thinking about, what they were planning ahead by their invoice vouchers, because they had to write out everything that they were going to do. So it was a great advantage to have that experience. After that 5.5-week trial, the jury found the director and the state of Illinois guilty of violation of First Amendment rights and awarded me $353,000. Now you want to talk about an angry... want to talk about angry people in state government that then turned their anger to federal government and said, I think we know how to get this guy and his attorney. The insurance company that was representing the state of Illinois, they had to settle with me for $110,000 because at first they refused to represent me. And so those two awards, they were pretty handsome. And it was a difficult thing after that, because the thing that the state government did was went to federal government and did everything that they could to have me indicted for willful failure to file an income tax return. And I would plead guilty to that any day. At each one of my speeches and conferences and radio, television, and before the steps of the IRS building in Washington, D.C. on April the 9th, I tell everyone I absolutely, completely refuse to file a 1040 income tax return. I will not permit the federal government to make me a criminal, because with the documents that I uncovered on my year-long journey throughout all of the states, I have 17,000 certified, notarized documents showing and proving that the 16th Amendment to the United States Constitution, the one that authorizes the government to take money from your paychecks, your bank account, your interest on whatever, is an absolute, complete, total fraud. None of us have to pay it. None of us. We are now in the stage where we're fighting federal government in Washington, D.C., and on September the 25th and 26th of September, the Congress of the United States has ordered the Department of Justice and the Internal Revenue Service to prove my books wrong, to prove me wrong, to prove Volume 1 wrong of the law that never was. Because in the law that never was, in Volume 1, I wrote a narrative report on everything that happened in each and every state. And corruption there, there is no 16th Amendment. Here is a picture of an organization called We the People that I'm involved with. We had taken 6 trips to Washington, D.C., and had meetings before the National Press Conference Room, and virtually begged Congress and the IRS and the Justice Department, show me where I'm wrong. Prove to me that I'm wrong. No one person in any of those agencies, and with the IRS they've got 115,000 employees, not one of those employees would answer, no one in Congress would answer, and no one in the Department of Justice would answer. So sometimes silence does really become golden. And it has in this case, because there are several of the congressmen who have now ordered the Justice Department to appear, and they will have to answer the questions on whether or not my work is correct or not. Let us all pray that when September 25th and 26th comes about, that they do not renege, that they do show up as ordered by Congress, We have word now that the Justice Department is saying, well, we're not going to be there. Well, Congress says, yes, you are. Well, we'll see. It's going to be another tough, hard fight. Because once this documentation is shown to the general public all over this country, I cannot imagine anyone filing another 1040 tax return. With the documentation, some of the documentation that I uncovered, here's one of my old buddies from, it's kind of beat up, but it is solid, it is good as gold. It is a document from the state of Kentucky. On February the 8th, it's a certified notarized document. On February the 8th of 1910, when the Senate was in session for the state of Kentucky, voting on the ratification procedure of the 16th Amendment, there were 9 senators that voted for the amendment and 22 that voted against. Yet Philandra Chase Knox, the Secretary of State, at that point in time, said that they had ratified the 16th Amendment legally, correctly, and properly. I cannot wait until the government indicts me again. I plead with them to do it. We're in a position now where we have a federal judge who must testify as to the documentation on the 16th Amendment. It's going to be interesting to have him tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury when 9 will ever become greater than 22. Because I want the attorneys to ask him one question. Judge, when in your wildest dreams or comprehension will 9 ever become greater than 22? You teach constitutional law at 3 universities in Chicago. Is this what you teach your students? I don't think we'll have to go much further beyond that because of all of the documentation. After the research work was completed and I began speaking all around the country, television, radio, Oprah Winfrey Show, CNN, C-SPAN, and all of the major radio shows, and I do television all the time. And federal government still tries to silence me. They still try to bribe. In 1985, when I was in Birmingham, Alabama, I had a man by the name of Warren Richardson. Warren Richardson is an individual who now claims to be a lobbyist for the last 37 years. Warren Richardson, when he made the telephone call to Mrs. Benson while I was in Birmingham, he called the house to begin with, and he asked her, where is Bill? He says, I need to talk to him immediately. It's an absolute emergency that he called Washington, D.C. And of course he asked her, he says, you know Senator Orrin Hatch. She says, no, I know of him, but I don't know him. When I finally got in touch with them, because I told Lorena, I said, I have no emergencies in Washington, D.C. I'm going to finish my lecturing, and that's going to be that. Then I'll call them. When I called the numbers that I was given, Warren Richardson said, Bill, he said, I work for Senator Orrin Hatch and work with him. He said, the thing that we want to do is to come to some sort of an agreement, or what we want to do is to have you stop talking about the 16th Amendment. He said that you've got to. He says you cannot permit those books, meaning Volume 1, Volume 2, to get into the hands of the kooks out there. He's calling you kooks. He's calling me a kook. He's calling my kids a kook. No, that doesn't happen. He tried every which way to stop this book. And he said, after some conversation, I don't think you quite understand what I really am after. I said, sure I do, but go ahead. He said, you have all of the books printed that you want printed. You name the number. You put a price on the book, whatever you want, we'll pay it. I didn't have to think very long. I said, Warren, go to hell. I'm not for sale. As far as I'm concerned, America is not for sale. My kids, my grandchildren are not for sale. I don't believe any one of you in this audience is for sale either. So when I tell them to go to hell, that's exactly what I mean. Warren and I are now kind of bucking heads because he says that I'm a liar. He never made the telephone calls. Well, it was very nice of him to invite a Baptist minister that I've known for many years from the state of Indiana to be a party of that conversation. So it wasn't Warren's word against mine or mine against his. There were 3 people on that telephone line. One, Greg Dixon from the Baptist Church in Indiana. And Greg wrote an affidavit to exactly everything that Warren said. And that's why I will never back down from Richardson, no matter what he does, no matter how he tries to do it. He's rather changing his tactics a little bit because this is how dirty government works, how bad they try to get people to see things their way. Richardson had a conversation with an individual by the name of Tupper Saucy. Tupper Saucy was an individual who wrote a book called Miracle on Main Street. And during that conversation, Richardson said that he thought Bill's books were wonderful and had the power to bring down the IRS. See, put it on the internet. And we were forwarded a copy of it. He said he wanted to contact certain unnamed congressmen and judges and talk with them about what to do. He spoke of the flat rate proponents, how their issue lost steam. If they could get behind Bill's material, they could rekindle their interest in a flat tax as an immediate patch to compensate for the dismantling of the IRS. He didn't want to destroy careers over this. He's not going to destroy mine. He'll destroy his, Senator Hatch's, and the rest of the Congress. Because you see what I did in 1987, I sent back to my printer about 550 books, and I had their names embossed on the bottom of the book in gold, just like the book is outlined, and sent it UPS to each and every senator and congressman. Now, you see, the reason I did that is because now they have knowledge of. And once you have knowledge of, under the law, you become an accessory after the fact to the criminal act committed by Philandra Chase Knox back in 1913 because it was a fraudulent act. That's why they're so disturbed. That's why they want to shut me up. Warren Richardson also says, well, he didn't want to destroy careers over this. Much attention has to be paid to how do politicians salvage their credibility after so many years of marginalizing Bill Benson. He spoke it. He wrote it. Don't put anything on the internet that you want other people to see. What happened to me, I think, was incredible to have happened to anyone in this country. Because what I did was the result of a federal judge that said, in 1983, I was working then with an attorney in the state of Indiana, and we had a tax case. It was a willful failure to file case. And in that case, we had about 300 documents that told us that it was a serious problem with the 16th Amendment. There were only 2 pages out of those 300 that caught my eye, and that was the vote in the state of Kentucky. The others were very questionable. I certainly wouldn't have traveled to all 48 states with the documentation I had. But the judge said, the documentation that you have is not certified, it is not notarized, and you do not have a witness to testify to, so I'll not permit the jury to see it. I will not enter it into evidence. He said, if you want to make your case, that's what you need, certified, notarized documents. When we go to Washington on September the 25th and 26th, there will be 17,000 certified, notarized documents staring the Department of Justice and the IRS and the Congress right in the face. Now, dispute them. What the government did was to have me indicted for willful failure to file a federal tax return in the year of 1980 and 81. That's when I received a $110,000 settlement from the insurance company. It was a settlement. You don't pay taxes on a settlement. But they were hell-bent on election to get me put away, shut me up for sure. Richardson couldn't do it. They were going to do it one way or the other. So we had a trial that lasted another 5.5 weeks before a jury. And 2 counts of willful failure to file, that trial should have been over in 3 days. We tried to present the documentation to the court. Now I have all the documentation. The government filed what's called a motion in limine precluding us from using that documentation, and the judge granted it. So we couldn't use it. So we had to come up with other strategy. The jury found me guilty of willful failure to file a tax return. I would plead guilty to that, no question about that. I did not file a return, nor will I. And what they did then was to Judge Paul Plunkett in Chicago was the judge that heard this case. Judge Paul Plunkett said in a transcript, whenever you're involved with the federal government or state government, make sure you get everything in a transcript on a tape recorder. No one can dispute what you're saying. Judge Plunkett says, I believe that his book, The Law That Never Was, which I have read, is the work of a man who investigated the 16th Amendment and came to certain conclusions about it and wrote a book about it. And I do not consider that in this case as any mark against Mr. Benson. If it's not a mark against me, it's not a mark against any one of you in this room or any person in this country. I am ignoring that to the extent that it's somehow supposed to reflect badly on him. Good for you, Judge. In fact, I think if it does anything, it makes an argument for him. Yet he wouldn't permit us to hear it. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Do you know the first guy I want to on a witness stand in any case in this country before a jury? Judge Paul Plunkett. For free speech in this country is protected. And when the day arrives when it isn't, we will not have a United States of America, at least as we know it. He is a person who has convictions and believes in them and speaks out about them, and I hope the day doesn't come when we punish people for doing that. What did he do? Probably 45 minutes after that, he sentenced me to 4 years in prison. You bet. I really hate no one. It's not in my heart to hate anyone. But there does come a day. There does come a day. Judge Paul Plunkett, in another part of the transcript, says some very interesting things that one day I hope we can just jam down his throat. The court, what about Mr. Dickstein's statement? Jeffrey Dickstein was my attorney, brilliant attorney. He was devastated when he lost this case. I said, Jeffrey, we have not lost the case until all of our appeals are exhausted. So have no concern. I feel that we're going to win this case. We'll win it before the appellate court. The judge says, what about Mr. Dickstein's statement of language in the case that says this question of the 16th Amendment has not been developed? We don't have a record on it, and I refuse to allow him to create a record on it. What about that issue? He's asking that question to the prosecutor. The prosecutor's name was Mr. Stone. Well, the 16th Amendment issue wasn't adjudicated in this case because it wasn't a proper defense. It had nothing whatsoever to do with why taxes weren't paid in 1980 and 1981. Mr. Benson, by his own testimony, his remarks again today, said his research began in 1984, and he wrote his book in 1985. And he even says, if you can believe him, he went into it with an open mind. See, I read this to you because I want you to know what's on this paper. I know it by heart. He couldn't possibly have been guided by his views on the 16th Amendment back in 1980 and 81. Judge Paul Plunkett stunned everyone with the next one paragraph sentence. And he said, but that's not the point. The point is, if his thesis is correct, there was no law to violate. No law to violate. You want to know how bad I want this man on a witness stand? In any case, in any state, anywhere, it makes no difference. He must take the witness stand. To go through with you a little bit as far as Volume 1 is concerned, it was a fascinating piece of research, believe me. It took a whole year out of my life to do this. I spent an entire year on the road. There were some times I was close to home. I was able to come home maybe for the weekend, and that I did. There was a document that I found in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. And that document stunned me again. I think it's one of the most, it's one of the best documents that I've found. It was written on February the 15th of 1913 by a man by the name of Reuben J. Clark, who was the attorney, who was the lawyer, the solicitor for Secretary of State Knox. What Clark wrote to Knox. He said, in the certified copies of the resolutions passed by the legislators of several states ratifying the proposed amendment, it appears that only 4 of those resolutions, those submitted by Arizona, North Dakota, Tennessee, and New Mexico, have quoted absolutely accurately and correctly the 16th Amendment as proposed by Congress. The other 33 resolutions all contain errors either of punctuation, capitalization, or wording. Minnesota, it is to be remembered, did not transmit to the department any official certified documentation. And they have to do that to be counted, yet Philander Knox counted them. On page 19 of Volume 1, the last paragraph, it says, and this was written by the attorney for the Secretary of State. Further, under the provision of the Constitution, a legislator is not authorized to alter in any way the amendment as proposed by Congress. The function of the legislator consists merely in the right to disprove or approve the proposed amendment. There's only one of 2 things that they can do, either accept or reject. With a yay, with a nay, with a yes, with a no. That's all the states can do in order to make this law. Congress does not make an amendment to the Constitution law. It is the states. It takes 3/4 of the states, once they get the official wording from the Congress of the United States, to decide whether or not they, as the states, want to have it become law. So it took 36 states to ratify the alleged 16th Amendment. And there's only 38 states in Knox's proclamation, so that's all we have to deal with is the 38 states. I have filed a lawsuit in the state of Oklahoma. Oklahoma will be first. Oklahoma, California, Tennessee, and Kentucky I put down as last because that's a given. I don't know how they're going to get out of that one. Making them prove that they have in fact ratified the 16th Amendment. With the documents that I have, they cannot prove that. They simply cannot. We've had in the state of Oklahoma, all the briefing is in, everything is in for the last 10 months. The only thing that we're waiting for is for the court to say, okay, let's get on with it. So far, we've been met with silence. But they'll have to change that because they have to hear this case. It will be the thing that I'm striving for as far as suing the various states. I get below the 35th state. The federal government then does not meet the requirement to have an amendment to take money from your pocket, because the requirement is 36 states, not 35. So I've got 48 states to play with. 38 states as far as the proclamation if I want to. But I don't think that I'm going to have to go that far. You don't have to use the wording, the capitalization, the punctuation that all of the states did not agree with Congress. So they changed the wording. They didn't agree with it. They didn't like it. The state of Maine amended the 16th Amendment for a state income tax. Nothing whatsoever to do with the federal tax. Ridiculous. In the state of Oklahoma that I am suing now, the legislative body must concur. They must iron out whatever differences they have as far as the yes, the yay, the no, however they want to do it. They cannot change words. But both houses changed the wording. Both houses came in with a different version of the 16th Amendment. They never concurred. They never got together. And they sent that documentation into Washington. And Philandra Chase Knox said they ratified legally, correctly, and properly. Never happened. Documentation is one of the most important things that you can have when you're doing battle with the federal government, state government, or any law enforcing agency. You've got to have the documentation. No documentation, you stand a real good chance of losing. The government put out, see, right now, to this day, and in 1931, I can trace it back to 1931, when the Congress of the United States knew for a fact, full well, that that amendment had not been ratified. What they did was ask their General Accounting Office to show them all of the errors or mistakes that were made in ratifying all of the amendments, not just the 16th, all of them. I deliberately have not put in Senate Document 240 in its entirety. But I do know that the 16th Amendment has not been ratified. I do know and have the documents that the 17th Amendment has not been ratified. And the 17th Amendment is the election of our senators. Documentation I can prove, I can back up, like I showed you with the state of Kentucky. That's why I believe that the Justice Department doesn't want to do battle with us now. I think that the thing that they're going to do is to say, okay, we're going to come up with a sales tax or a flat value added tax, and then abolish the present tax as we know it, and then say, what have you got to talk about? Well, plenty. Because they cannot under any circumstance put in a flat tax, a value-added tax, or a sales tax for the entire country without having another amendment to the United States Constitution. Would you let your senators vote or congressmen vote for an amendment that the government wants to slap another tax with you? I don't think so. 11 states failed to vote on the 16th Amendment. Failed to vote. So I don't have to argue capitalization, punctuation, or wording. 11 states failed to vote. Their documentation is still tabled. And how do I know that? I read each and every book from 1909 to 1916 as far as the amendment is concerned. I went back before, and I went many years ahead because I didn't want anybody to say I left the stone unturned. There are 6 states that rejected the amendment outright. I even went to those states because I wasn't going to have a judge come to me someday or in court one day and say, well, Mr. Benson, why didn't you check those states? Are you afraid that they in fact ratified? So I took the time and the expense to go ahead and do that. And it was very fortunate for us that during that 1983 case that I talked about in Hammond, Indiana, there was a man by the name of George Sitka from Bristol, Connecticut, who heard about what was happening, heard about that case, and called me and asked me if he could come and see me. And I said, of course. And when he did, believe me, it was a shock of my life because he said, what are you waiting for? Why aren't you on the road like yesterday to get this documentation? I said, George, finances. It's a tremendous problem as far as finances is concerned. It's going to cost a great deal of money. He said, here, you have an open checkbook. Do what you want to do, regardless of what it costs. If I needed $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000 when I was on the road getting documentation, and the certified notarized documents cost anywhere from $10 a page to $15 a page to $1 a page to have the original documents just put on a copy machine. And if I needed that, whatever I needed, all I do is make a telephone call to George. The money would be in the mail, 24-hour mail at the hotel I was staying at the next morning, and away I would go. It's too bad, and one of the saddest things that I have ever had to write was George Sitka's obituary. George died about 4 years ago of a heart attack, and I greatly miss him because he's a great asset to our society, to our country. He certainly kicked off the 16th Amendment, because if it were not for George, I certainly wouldn't have gone to all 48 states. I don't know of anybody that would have. Nobody has done it since I have, and it is a tremendous job, and I don't believe that anybody will do it in the near future. I highly doubt it. What Philander Chase Knox says in his proclamation is that it further appears from the official documents on file with the department. It appears. He always says that it appears. Well, appears doesn't make it so. Appears doesn't make it so. Appears is not going to be 9 versus 22. Might appear that way, but when I see the record and have the official document, then appears never comes into anything legally. It has to be one way or the other. Congressman Traficant, his office sent me a fax. Okay, this is a fax from Congressman Traficant's office. And because I keep in touch with these people. I want to let them know I'm here. You know, I haven't gone anyplace yet. They all say, Bill, you know, you're 74 years old. When are you going to cash it in? I have vowed if I have to live to be another 74 years old, I'll see this tax go down. Traficant says, the IRS said last year that the 81% of errage rate dropped to 73% this past year. Unbelievable. The internal, he calls it rectal service. The internal rectal service screws up 73% of the time and then even brags about it. If that's not enough to cause your 1040 to collapse, the IRS agents say that wrong advice to taxpayers only 50% of the time last year, according to an investigation. Beam me up, he says. The IRS does not need more workers. The IRS does not need more money. These stumbling, fumbling, bumbling, mistaken, prone miscompoops have got to go. And I agree with Traficant. Yeah, they've got to go. Congressman Traficant was one of the ones that received. See, if I would read this to somebody, or if I would just talk about it, they would say, "Oh yeah, he did say that, sure." That's why you want to have the document that was faxed to my office from his office, and then anyway, that he's proud of what he said, and Traficant received a little more information from me, and a little more information about what Warren Richardson is making an attempt to do, because Warren Richardson is in fact a lobbyist, and I didn't know that until about a couple months ago. Who does a lobbyist work for? Not for you and I. They do not. They work for whoever will pay them the most money to get whatever bill through to the Congress that they can get through. Richardson is not working to down this income tax, absolutely not. He's working, as he said, for a sales tax, a flat tax. He wants to do away with the 16th Amendment. We're going to do away with it without his help. We don't need him. I didn't need his bribes in 1985, and I don't need him today. It's strange that that man wrote me a very, very complimentary letter talking about the work that I did, how I did it, and the whole thing, some 16 years after he made the bribe. You know, I just found that a little bit unbelievable that he would do that. But it shows that he's keeping track of me. You know, he knows what I'm doing and what happens and so on. This is a letter from Warren Richardson that he put on the internet and that he sent to me. And he says, "In my professional opinion, your two books demonstrate, at least to me, that the 16th Amendment was not properly ratified, even though the Secretary of State made the public announcement that it had been properly ratified. When only 4 states of the required 38 required it properly, how could it be considered valid? In view of the facts, how could it become a valid part of the Constitution?" Well, Warren, you didn't do your homework, you see, because in Washington, D.C., with the documents that are there, it does show that 4 states did ratify. I read that to you. But when you read the journals from the state, and that's where it counts, it's from the state, because the Congress of the United States, or whoever they would want, or the one of the bodies in Washington cannot certify the documentation for the state. The state is the only one that can put a pretty blue ribbon and a gold seal on it, like you saw with the state of Kentucky. Federal government can't do that. Richardson is amazing to me. He really is. Although I am a lawyer, it is important to note that I am not a constitutional scholar. Therefore, I do not speak as one. As noted above, it is my opinion that based on your overwhelming evidence that the 16th Amendment has not been properly ratified. Further, I believe that it is imperative to have legal scholars in the constitutional law study the matter deeply. Warren, we don't need that. We got the records. And tender their opinions to the proper courts, and provided they come to the same conclusions we do. He never came to a conclusion with me. He's never seen the 17,000 certified notarized documents. I don't need Warren Richardson, but I guess he needs me one way or the other to try and knock this down. He goes on about, "Bill, you have done a magnificent job in providing the factual data about whatever the 16th Amendment was properly ratified. I am hopeful that you can find the scholars who will go to the next step and suggest what should be done now. Thanks for your work. You have done a great service to your country. Warren Richardson." Well, Warren, you know we're going to be in Washington, D.C. on September the 25th and 26th, and he is not wanted there. If I see any, I don't know Warren Richardson. I've never met him. I've only had one telephone conversation with him, and that was that one in 1985. But if I find out that Warren Richardson is even in the audience, I'm going to scream up and down like a banshee rooster. Because the only thing he's doing is trying to undermine for whatever committee he's working for. And Orrin Hatch certainly wants a sales tax. He wants a flat tax. They want a sales tax that'll put you at 15 to 23% to start. What do you think they're going to do the next year, the next 2 years? It'll be twice as bad as we have now. But the thing that they're saying, well, no, it won't, Bill, no, it won't, because you won't have the IRS after you. They won't be kicking your doors down. They won't be doing this. They won't be doing that. There will be no more IRS. With the IRS, it was incredible that I was able to find a couple of agents like Joseph Bannister. I think Joe Bannister was here maybe last year. And here's a man that was a highly educated, devoted, dedicated man to the Internal Revenue Service. He kicked a lot of doors down and made a lot of people miserable and unhappy. But he heard about the 16th Amendment. He heard about a couple of other things from D.V. Kidd, who appeared on a radio television show, Jeff Metcalf's show. And Joe called me. And I talked to Joe for a year and a half. And he said, well, Bill, I need one more ounce of proof. He said, I need something more. I said, okay, Mr. Investigator, I will give you something more. I'm going to give you this certified, notarized document from the state of Kentucky that will absolutely, completely prove that state has not ratified the amendment. I will trust you, Joe, to give that document back to me after you reviewed it for a length of time. And if you don't, I'm coming out to California and get it. Joe has turned out to be a very honorable person. He is. I'm glad to have him on our side right now. Joe and I worked a tax case in Maryland just a couple of months ago. No, it's been 10 months ago because nothing has been heard by the IRS for the last 10 months. We worked another case in West Virginia, and that case was 9 months old, and the potential defendant and no one has heard anything from the IRS. Right now, if anyone makes an attempt to bother anyone as far as the taxes are concerned, if they call you in or whatever, I have designed a program that will go into the IRS. The box is a 14 by 14 by 14 box, and it weighs 49 pounds with all government records, government documents that go into the Internal Revenue Service. Each and every document is presented by me to the agents and to their supervisors, and it is made a part of the individual's permanent record. This is his or her or their state of mind, frame of mind, reliance, and belief. Make it a part of their permanent record. Now, when you do that, the IRS has to bring the documentation into court if they want to try a case. We don't have to file motions in limine. So if they want to try anybody, and there have been hundreds of people that have done this. The first case I had was with a man by the name of Dr. Frank O'Neill from California. They were after his wife for some $80,000, the Franchise Tax Board. The 16th Amendment documentation went into the California Franchise Tax Board, and it took them 6 months to come back with a letter and say, we are sorry that we have inconvenienced you. Your case is now closed because of the documentation you have presented. Only thing was presented were documents like this, many more, and of course, Volume 1 of the law that never was. Ladies and gentlemen, I could probably talk to you for a bunch of hours, but I know time runs short. We have 55 minutes up here, and sometimes it gets pretty tough to squeeze everything in that short period of time, and really you can't. But I want to thank you for being such an attentive audience, and I again want to thank Dean for having me here. It's been a great pleasure. I know a couple of people have worked on my back and my shoulder, and it sure feels a lot better. I can walk a little bit better this morning than I did yesterday. So, and oh yes, and the scarf. I'm very proud to wear the scarf because there was a raffle this morning and I won it. So it isn't something that I would just throw on my table or throw in my briefcase. I'm proud of it. I mean, because it was given to me here and I shall wear it. So I thank you very, very kindly. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. One of the things that I always say in my writings at the conclusion, remember, together we shall win. And you've shown that today. Thank you very much.
Well, we sure thank you, Bill. Thank you for being here.
Okay. Thanks, Steve.
Folks, now you've got proof yourself if you want to get it before the conference is over. Bill's books are back there. They're available. You can take home the documentation with yourselves. And if anybody challenges you, you've got it with you when you get home. Now it's break time. I hope you